Hello friends, here I am with new story. I hope you all like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start the video with summary. After years of infidelity, Zeus finally decides to commit to his marriage with Hera. It is the start of a new era for Olympus and the start of the life of a new god. The young god, Chapter 1. I love you, Hera. His hands roamed her shapely curves as his lips delicately touched her ear, making her shiver in delight. Every one of her moons sent sparks of shock down his spine, making him yearn for more. Her warm breath on his neck, her delicate grip around his chest, her long and shapely legs around his waist, and her euphoric warmth around his length, all were his addictions. Even after so many eons together, Hera was still the only woman who could make him feel so exhilarated. She was perfect. From her luscious blonde hair, to her powerful golden eyes. From her beckoning pink lips, to her soft and warm cheek. From her bodacious breasts, to her inviting womanhood, she was perfect. Hera gently kissed his ear and whispered, "I love you too, Zeus." No matter how often or frequent she told him those 3 words, the genuine affection and love behind them would never falter or weaken. Phares, the goddess of familial love, marriage, motherhood, and women, had loved him. There were moments when their love of each other had nearly brought about the end of the world, but regardless, their love remained. No matter how many times his own pathetic urges would take over him, no matter how many times he had betrayed her love for him, no matter how many times he had taken advantage of her faithfulness, she still loved him. The guilt was overwhelming. Every single time Zeus would hear Hera whisper those 3 words to him, a nearly unsurmountable pressure of guilt would be placed on his shoulders, as if he was holding up the sky. It would rip his heart apart and fill his soul with unbelievable anger directed at himself. For the rest of his existence he would remember vividly the expression on his wife's face the moment she would find a demigod child of his in the mortal world. The hurt of betrayal and heartbreak his darling wife would give him every single time he failed to prove his love for her. Zeus wrapped his arms around Hera as he continued to thrust into her, trying his all to give her the satisfaction she deserved more than any woman living. He wanted to make her forget about all his other children and women, forget about all the times he had betrayed her. He wanted to start anew with her, his wife, his other half. Zeus, Hera's own climax, met with her husband's, causing her to cry out in ecstasy. The king of the gods wrapped his arms around his wife and pulled her close, hugging her to his chest. His breathing was starting to level out, but his heart was still in turmoil. All he could do at the moment was hold Hera close to him and try to silently convey that he loved her. "That was amazing," Hera whispered with a sweet smile before she kissed her husband gently on his lips. It was the sacred month of June, and Hera had taken her annual scared bath in order to regain her virginity. She had once again given her husband her maidenhood. It had been so many times she had forgotten how many times he took her first. Despite all, she was proud that she and Zeus shared such a bond. No other couple in existence had such a tradition and record. Hera smiled as she lay on top of her husband's chest. "We're going to have tea," she was swiftly cut off as Zeus kissed her hard on the lips, leaning his body upwards until he was sitting upright on their bed. She was a little shocked at the ferocity of the kiss. It had been a very long time since her husband had kissed her so fiercely. It was so intense. Hera found herself moaning into the kiss and wrapped her arms around Zeus' neck to pull him closer. "I love you," he mumbled against her lips. Hera was pushed onto her back as Zeus climbed on top of her, his length growing inside of her again. She moaned blissfully as she felt her husband slide in and out of her. It was a little shocking to see Zeus acting so passionate. It was almost like all those eons ago when they were newlyweds. It made her happy. Being so wanted and lusted by her husband made her feel good. Hera nibbled on Zeus' earlobe and whispered, "I love you too." Zeus stared down at his wife with his piercing blue eyes, filled with much more love and affection than they usually would. Hera was even more shocked at his gaze. She had forgotten the last time he looked at her in such a way. He lightly laced his fingers with hers and lightly kissed his way from her jawline to her lips, reveling in her heavenly taste. "I love that look on your face," he whispered huskily. "You look happy like that." Zeus wanted Hera to only look happy, not scared, angry, or depressed, and only happy. He would always remember how angry she would look when she would find one of his demigod children. That horrified and betrayed expression, he hated that look. But the expression that would haunt his mind would be how scared and depressed Hera looked when he had chained her above the abyss, threatening to banish her to the infinity of chaos. Whenever he would think about those days he would feel a stab of pain in his heart. He kissed his wife again as he frowned. "I want you to be happy, Hera." "Zeus," Hera began, growing concerned at how strange her husband was acting. "What's going on?" He gave her a soft smile and nuzzled against her neck. "I'm so sorry, my love." After Inns, Zeus finally felt ready, so say the words he had wanted to say. "I'm sorry for betraying you, for betraying your love for me and our marriage, so many times." Hera's eyes widened as Anne wrapped her arms around his waist by reflex. "Please know that no matter what happens, no one will ever replace you. You will always be the only one I love so much. I know that it's just empty words and you have every right to feel skeptical, but it's the truth." Hera was more shocked than touched, but she stared into his eyes with welling tears as he gazed down upon her. "Oh really? I don't ever want to lose you." For the first time in eons, Zeus allowed a hint of fear to pass through his eyes. "I don't know what would happen to me, how it would change me, if you left me. I would probably go insane and destroy everything in sight." "I will never leave you, Zeus," she replied, placing a warm and comforting hand on his cheek. "You know that." He reached up and gently held her hand against his cheek with a smile. "I promise, from now on you will be the only woman I will make love to." He leaned down to kiss her softly on the lips, ignoring her surprise. "You will be the only woman I will ever kiss, ever hold, ever love like this." Hera's breath itched as her heart threatened to beat out of her chest. She focused her whole being into listening to his words, wondering if he would finally say it. "You're my wife, my queen, my other half." Zeus pressed his forehead against his wife's and stared into her eyes. "I, Zeus, Lord of the sky, God of honor, justice and lightning, and King of Olympus, do swear on the river Styx that I will never be unfaithful to my wife, Hera, goddess of marriage, home, and family, the Queen of Olympus. From this moment on, she will be the only woman I will ever love. Chaos and order strike me down if I ever break this vow." The tears were now flowing freely from Hera's eyes and she shakily cupped her husband's face. "Zeus, you don't have to say anything." Zeus smiled, feeling mountains lighter than before. "I should have said these words the day we married. Sorry for being millennia late." Hera sobbed and pulled Zeus down, holding him as close to her as possible. I love you. And I love you, only you." "Zeus, I hate you." Olympus shook as the queen of the gods flared her overwhelming power. Waves of golden light blasted from the Zeus temple, creating panic among the lesser gods. Her cries echoed through almost every hallway and her power was growing by the second. Throughout the gods' reign, this had happened 4 times, but the last 3 times had been eons ago. For the first time in a long time, Hera was giving birth to a child. "Hera, my love, please calm down." Zeus paled at the sight of his wife glaring at him in her true godly form, her power growing to the point where he began to feel weak. "You're almost there. Just a few more minutes." Zeus started to edge away, feeling the fear at full blast. "Please, calm down." Hera growled and grabbed her husband's hand before he could back away further, almost crushing his godly bones. "Don't you dare sneak away." "Sister, Zeus is right, please calm down." Hestia held onto her sister's other hand and gently patted her shoulder, her eyes shimmering with warmth and love. "We can see the child's head. This is almost over." Unlike other goddesses, Hera would carry all her children for 9 months and suffer through a painful delivery. Because she was the goddess of motherhood, she had to suffer just as her people would have to. It represented the sacredness of motherly love and the embodiment of the sacrifice every mother would go through for her child. "Don't worry, Hera, Mother is here and she'll make sure the baby is fine." Zeus' words actually managed to calm his wife a little, not so much because of his tone, but the fact that he pointed out that their mother was present. Mother Rhea, the titaness of childbirth, was perhaps the only other being in existence that was better skilled than Hera in delivering a child. If there was one thing Hera was sure of, it would be that Rhea would never let a grandchild of hers perish on the birthing bed. Rhea knelt between Hera's legs and calmly handled the situation. "Push, Hera, you're almost there." Zeus watched as his wife's face scrunched up in pain. "Mother, how much longer?" "The head is already out." Rhea looked up and stared at her baby girl. "You can do it, my daughter." It seemed as if an eternity had passed before Zeus finally heard the sound of crying. a toddler crying. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding and smiled down at his exhausted wife. Even the great goddess Hera felt powerless after giving birth to their youngest child, perhaps even more so than when she had Ares. Relieved, Zeus sat and kissed Hera softly, resting his forehead against hers. "Thank you, my love." Rhea wrapped a golden towel around the newborn and smiled down at it. "It's a boy," she said as Hestia smiled at the sight of the baby, "a beautiful little baby boy." "Mother," whispered Hera weakly, "let me see him." Rhea gently handed the crying bundle to her daughter, and she smiled when she saw Hera's eyes light up. Zeus and Hera stared at their newborn child and just smiled. He was perfect. Thin tresses of blonde hair could already be seen, a trait he had clearly inherited from his mother and grandmother, and a pair of electric blue eyes stared back at his parents. He was crying loudly and held his tiny hands into fists, but with only one gentle kiss on the forehead from his mother, he stopped and looked up at her mother with his big round eyes. Rhea knew, from that moment on, Hera would love that small little baby until the moment she faints. "He looks like you," Hera whispered to her husband, who nodded with a smile. "He really does." Rhea smiled and nodded along. The boy looked almost exactly as Zeus did when he was a baby. "He's going to grow up to be a fine god." "Congratulations, sister." Hestia smiled and kissed her younger sister's head, happy for her and her little boy. "He's beautiful." "Thank you," Hera whispered as she looked up at her sister, tears welling in her eyes. Zeus gently ran his hand over his son's nearly bald head and felt the fatherly love he had for the small bundle, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. "We still have to give him a name." The king turned to his mother and smiled. "Can you give him a name, mother?" Rhea smiled and gently patted her grandson's head. "This little guy represents the dawn of a new era, the rebirth of your marriage to each other, so let's give him an original name." For the past century, Rhea had been exploring the wonders of Eastern civilization, and with her experience she thought of the perfect name, Naruto, Maelstrom. To mark the start of a new age for Western civilization, we give our newest god a name that will stun the entire world, Eastern and Western, and he will watch over them all. Hera smiled and tearfully pressed her cheek to her son's head. "Our little Maelstrom." Zeus gently tickled his son's chin with a finger and chuckled when Naruto grabbed hold of it. "Welcome to the family, Naruto. Welcome to Olympus." The young god. Chapter 2. Ever since the fall of the Titans and the dawn of the Olympians, Mount Olympus had been the epicenter of the world. No matter where Western civilization shifted, Olympus correspondingly moved along, not following, but leading. From Greece, to Rome, to Germany, to Great Britain, and finally to the United States of America, it had been paramount in regard to the prosperity of mankind. With the countless involuntary and oblivious offerings to the gods by humanity, the immortals watched over their domains with benevolence, most of the time. From the heights of Mount Olympus, the gods reigned superior and celestial, vastly more glorious and eternal than their lowly creations. For millennia, the gods had made countless decisions that shaped the course of human history, and all had been done inside the council chamber, the room with 12 thrones for the 12 Olympians. From Zeus to Dionysus, or from Hera to Athena, many orders and demands had been ironed inside the chamber. Cries of anger, calls for blood, and bellows of fury had all been common inside such an important chamber of the gods, but rarely had lullabies been heard. Zeus smiled as he watched his wife hum the same tune Mother Rhea had sung for him all those eons ago. He could still remember his childhood home in ancient Greece with Mother Rhea taking care of him every day. It felt so distant, but he would never forget how loving and caring his mother had been for him, and he could only hope that his son would experience the same thing. He had faith that Hera would be no less of a mother than Rhea, especially since she loved Naruto more than anything. Ba-ba-ba, ba-ba-boo-ba-ba, babbled the baby god as he clapped his pudgy hands together. Hera giggled and kissed her baby boy's forehead. "You are so cute." Little Naruto giggled back at his mother with the beautiful blue eyes that he shared with his father and grabbed hold on her finger. "Aren't you, my little Naruto?" Hera laughed along with her baby and looked over at her husband. "He really looks like you when he laughs." "Well, you'd be the only one to know that." Zeus stood from his throne and stepped over to the one on his left. "Hera's throne. I'd sooner fade than let the others see how I laugh." Hera smirked. "Oh, please. Athena and Artemis had heard you laugh countless times. You're a big marshmallow when it comes to them." "They're my little girls." The king smiled and crossed his arms. I don't mind if they know, just not the boys. Order and chaos know that Apollo and Hermes will annoy me about it. Hera smiled at her husband, who had become much more cheerful and optimistic lately, and kissed his cheek. Come, hold your son. Zeus' smile was as bright as Apollo's when he held his baby boy in his arms. Naruto giggled as his father's bear tickled his face and tugged on it roughly, making the king of the gods cringe. His son was already strong. It was surprising for Zeus that he felt such strong paternal love for his son. When Ares and Hephaestus were born, he had only been annoyed and disappointed. His opinion of Hephaestus had improved drastically over the years, but Ares had always been a disappointment, and now his feelings for Naruto gave him hope. Perhaps he and Hera could finally have a son who could handle being the official prince of Olympus, a god sired by Zeus and Hera, the king and queen of Olympus. So have you spoken with the four winds yet? Zeus nodded without looking away from his son's clapping hands. Yes, they were fine with the idea. Aeolus will definitely be angry since he's been expecting to be promoted to godhood for many years, but he should understand that our son outclasses him. The king lifted his son and held him proudly at arm's length. I'm sure Naruto will be a great god of the four winds. The baby continued to babble on and started to suck on his thumb, staring at his dad with all the innocence of the world. Along with complete control over violent sky storms, he will be one of the most powerful gods on Olympus. Hera smiled and rubbed her son's soft golden tresses. Those are good domains, well suited for our little boy. She tried to imagine her youngest son all grown up and strong, Naruto, the god of violent sky storms and the commander of the four winds. And if he's anything like the other boys, I'm sure he'd be excited about his powers. I like having him like this, whispered Hera as she just stared lovingly at her son. I don't want him to grow up too fast. I want him to enjoy his time as a child. She took Naruto from Zeus' arms and held him closely to her chest, smiling as Naruto giggled up at her. I want him to be our baby a little while longer. Zeus grabbed his wife's hand and squeezed tenderly. By all accounts, his childhood will be better than mine and far better than yours. Hera scoffed. That's not very hard to do at that moment. The council chamber's tall golden double doors were pushed open by the guards and a bright light blasted into the room. Zeus sighed and shook his head as Hera gave a small smile, both already expecting something of the sort to happen. It was just like the god of the sun to do something like this. Lil bro! Cried the strongest son of Zeus loudly. Apollo, dressed in a simple California beach t-shirt under a white hoodie and a pair of beach shorts, manifested in a ball of sunlight and ran over to his father's and stepmother's thrones. He usually wouldn't be too punctual to most council meetings. They were too boring, like the winter, but this time he showed up early. It wasn't every day his father would have a new immortal child, and Apollo couldn't wait to meet his new awesome little brother. Zeus gave his sunny son a stern stare. Apollo, not so loud. Sorry, Dad, replied the god of the sun as he jumped to a halt in front of his father, but I'm excited to meet my little brother. Hera smiled and held the curious and wide-eyed Naruto higher so he could see his bright brother. It's already so much better than last time since this one didn't steal my stuff. Hera stood from her throne with Naruto in her arms. Do you want to hold him, Apollo? Yes, please. Naruto giggled loudly as he met his older brother for the first time. Apollo looked very happy and friendly. His golden hair was not unlike Naruto's and they had the same blue eyes, a beautiful blue they both inherited from their father. The baby felt warm in the arms of the sun god and reached up to pat his face with his pudgy hands. I can already tell that he and I are going to be close. The all-seeing god smiled at his father. Good job, Dad. Zeus sighed again. Have you been drinking too much coffee again? Of course not, I am simply high on life. Apollo grinned as he bounced his brother lightly in his arms and made weird faces at him. It's been such a long time since we've had a baby in the family and they are just so awesome to play with. Hera gave her stepson a look. You have plenty of babies yourself. Yeah, but they're all down in the human world and it's a little bit weird to see their mothers again, said the god as he shivered at the thought of one of his past lovers glaring at him for leaving. And they aren't immortal, which makes things so much more complicated. Maybe you should find a nice immortal wife and have an immortal baby. Zeus smirked as Apollo grinned sheepishly. Sorry Lady Hera, but I'm enjoying my freedom. Hera and Leto had both, not together, tried to convince the flashy sun god to find a wife. Leto wanted him to marry because she wanted grandchildren that would live longer than a century, and Artemis would never give her any, and Hera wanted to see everyone married, including her stepchildren. Hera crossed her arms and pursed her lips. Well, don't go trying to sell this freedom to my little boy. I want him to have a nice marriage and a wonderful wife. Zeus chuckled. Hera, he's still a baby. Someone scoffed as they entered the chamber. Rather, I'm sure she's already written a list of possible brides for the baby. Demeter strolled into the room in her usual golden beauty and smiled at her younger sister. Who's on the top of your list right now, Chione? Hera rolled her eyes. Of course not. That slutty little deranged goddess will never be my daughter-in-law. Demeter smiled at the baby and tickled his chin. He's really cute. She giggled at the baby before she turned to look at her sister. I can just tell that you're going to go crazy when he starts liking girls that you don't like. Hera scoffed. No, I won't, and I'm sure Naruto will find a great wife for himself. Well, if he's like any of the male gods we all know, that wouldn't happen too soon. Hera took her baby back from Apollo and gave him a small glare. Don't you dare teach him to be a playboy like you. Apollo scratched the back of his head. Don't worry, Lady Hera, I won't. No, he won't, I'll make sure of it. Artemis, along with Athena, Hermes, Hephaestus, Dionysus, and Poseidon stepped into the room. The goddess of the moon was glaring at her twin, relaying the message, don't mess with their new little brother. Hera smiled at her along with Athena, all amused at the frightened look on Apollo's face. Artemis wanted to grab at the chance of making one male god that wouldn't act like a pig and treat women badly, and her new little brother was a perfect chance. He sure is a happy little guy, huh? Said Hermes with a smile as he waved his caduceus over Naruto's head, making the baby's blue eyes follow George and Martha with incredible amusement. Hey, Dee, come over here. Dionysus was already snoring on his throne. After a night of trying to find ways to get drunk, he was utterly spent and couldn't even move. It was a miracle that he made it to the council chamber. Hera shook his head. He better not give Naruto any wine. Apollo ignored his second youngest brother and just tickled the baby's chin. He's a little ball of energy. Naruto was still paying most of his attention to his sunny older brother, and that made Apollo love him even more than before. A little distant away, Poseidon clapped his brother on the shoulder and gave him a small hug. Congratulations, brother. The god of the sky gave his brother a smile brighter than any he'd given in the past 1,000 years. It's been a very long time since we've had a new immortal child. I've almost forgotten how festive it feels. You can do the same, brother. Zeus chuckled as he gave Poseidon a knowing smile. I'm sure you and Amphitrite want to. Maybe a try for a little daughter. The god of the seas laughed. I'll sure try. I feel a haiku coming. Almost everyone groaned and glared at the god of poetry as he grinned. I have a little br. Shut up, you idiot. The swift slap on the back of the head by his twin sister, successfully ending the poem. Don't you dare pass on your terrible poem tendencies to Naruto. Ares and Aphrodite were the last to arrive, and the goddess of love quickly squealed and skipped over to the group. He's so cute! Squealed Aphrodite as she hopped up and down excitedly as she looked down at the baby. He is going to be the most handsome god when he grows up. Ares, Apollo and Hermes all rolled their eyes at the goddess of love's words, but she ignored all of them. I can just tell that he's going to break the hearts of many girls in the world. Don't mess around with my son's love life, Aphrodite, Hera said with a stern stare. He should have his own choice in choosing his wife. The goddess of love rolled her eyes. Oh please, like you haven't already thought out a list of goddesses for him to potentially marry. Demeter laughed. Yep, she totally did. I haven't. The queen looked away and kissed her son's forehead. I'm sure he will choose a nice lady for himself. I'm sure he will coo Aphrodite as she tickled the baby's chin, making him gurgle and giggle uncontrollably. Oh, you're so cute. Ignoring her stepchildren, Hera smiled and gestured to her two sons. Come over here, Ares, Hephaestus. Come meet your little brother. The god of war and god of the smith stepped closer to their mother's throne and looked down at the small bundle. It had been a very long time since they had seen their mother so happy and their father so calm and cheerful, so the little kid definitely did something good, but they just didn't expect their mother to have another child. As another child of Zeus and Hera, Ares expected more from his little brother. He didn't grow up instantly like Apollo and didn't feel very strong, so it was a little disappointing. He wanted a new brother to spar with. "Do you want to hold him?" asked Hera, looking at her most skilled son, Hephaestus. The deformed god looked apprehensive. He was afraid that the baby would be scared of his face. And to be honest, he was a little jealous. His mother and father both looked happy and proud of his little brother and didn't kick him off Mount Olympus, so much better than his childhood. But nonetheless, he wanted to at least hold his little brother once, even if he would be scared of him. "Yes, please." The smith god gently reached out and accepted the bundle with his calloused hands, bringing the baby close to his chest. Hera smiled at the sight. "How sweet," he softly muttered the burly god. "I'm your older brother, Hephaestus." He was expecting some crying or sobbing or the laughter of the other gods, but instead he heard giggling. Looking down, Naruto was giggling and was reaching up at him with his little arms and hands. Hephaestus looked shocked that his little brother pulled lightly on his beard and continued to giggle. He wasn't scared of him at all and seemed to like him a lot. "AWW, that's cute." Aphrodite smiled at her husband, a little glad that the little baby liked him. "He really likes you?" Hephaestus looked over at his wife and gave a small smile. "Yeah." Ares scoffed and walked up to his least favorite brother. "Let me see the little brat." He, without much tact, scooped Naruto out of his brother's arms and held him at arm's length. Hera, Artemis and Meteor almost lashed out at him, and Apollo, Poseidon and Zeus almost blasted him, but he spoke up before they could react. "I'm your older brother too, Squirt. Don't be so rough, you idiotic buffoon." Athena glared at her brother and gently took her little brother from his hands. "He's a baby?" Ares rolled his eyes. "He's a baby god." The god of war glowered at his sister and the baby, who was snuggling into Athena's warm embrace. "If he's so weak, then what's the point of keeping him?" Many others glared at him, but he continued. "Right, you brat." Naruto looked at Ares from Athena's arms, but blue eyes appearing oddly angry. "Waaaaa." With his cry, a small thundercloud manifested above Ares' head, about the same size as a book, with bolts of lightning blasting from it. The god of war yelped when a bolt blasted the top of his head, scorching the back of his head bald. "What in Hades is this?" He yelled angrily, but the cloud blasted him again, this time in the eye when he looked up at it. "Shit, my eye." Apollo laughed along with almost everyone else. "Little bro's got some skills." Athena smirked and hugged Naruto closer. "I guess Naruto's not weak after all." Little brat Naruto giggled at his brother's smoking hair and bounced around in Athena's arms. The goddess of wisdom couldn't help but smile at her little brother, someone she had been looking forward to meeting. It had been a long time since a new immortal had been born, especially one with so much potential. The children of both Hera and Zeus had tremendous potential. She looked forward to seeing how a god growing up in modern times would be different from the rest of them. She had hoped that he'd be the new blood Olympus had long since needed. "Hello, Naruto." Athena gave the baby a small smile and gently held him in front of her, looking into his electric blue with her dark gray. "I'm Athena, one of your older sisters." "I'm also your older sister," whispered Artemis softly as she stood next to her sister. "I'm Artemis, and I'll make sure you don't turn into a peak like some of your brothers." Apollo rolled his eyes. "Very funny. You gave him control of a part of your domain, brother?" asked Poseidon. Zeus smiled and nodded. "Yes, since Mother named him Maelstrom, I figured I'd grant him the control over violent storms and the four winds." Rhea and Hera smiled as the others listened on. "I was going to give Irolas godhood, but my son should be more suitable for the position when he is fully grown." Hera nodded along. "He can still choose his own domains later, but these two will be the bigger and more powerful ones." Apollo grinned. "So the little guy is the god of violent storms and four winds. Not bad at all." He grinned at Hermes and whispered softly, "We are so bringing him with us when he's older." "That's right, he's going to be a heartthrob." Artemis heard and glared at her twin. "I will never let you turn our little brother into a player like you." "Neither will I," said Hera, giving Hermes and Apollo a stern stare. The two gods chuckled sheepishly and nodded. "Got it, no bringing him to meet girls." Poseidon leaned closer to his brother and whispered in his ear, "So I guess your kid isn't going to be much like you." Zeus chuckled and crossed his arms. "If Artemis and Hera are guarding him like that all the time, he's going to have a hard time meeting any girl." "I don't think that's going to be a problem." The king of Olympus had no doubt that the girl will be throwing themselves at his son, who was a prince of Olympus and most likely one of the most powerful gods. The problem is keeping most of them off of him. Poseidon laughed. The next few years are going to be entertaining to watch. Rhea stood next to Hera's throne and smiled down at her grandson, the newest addition to her family. She had a feeling that he would make a difference on Olympus and the world. As a god and the son of Zeus and Hera, Rick could only imagine how much Naruto would accomplish in his eternal life. Temple of Zeus, the Lord of the Sky, leaned against one of many grand columns supporting his personal palace with his arms crossed, staring down at the human world with a small frown on his face. Ever since his reconciliation with his beautiful wife, he felt more relaxed and stress-free than he ever had been, but there were still concerns in his mind. Perhaps it was the overwhelming fatherly love he felt for his youngest boy, but he was really starting to worry and miss his two living demigod children down on Earth, little Thalia and little Jason. A pair of slender arms snaked around his waist, making him smile as he felt a pair of soft lips touch his face. "Is something troubling you, dear?" Zeus turned and pulled Hera into his arms, kissing her softly. "Of course not. These are the best times of my life." Hera sighed with a small smile. "You know that your lies will never fool me." The Lord of the Sky laughed and kissed his queen's forehead. "I suppose that is true, but at least now neither of us has to worry about anything coming between us." Zeus sighed in relaxation and played with Hera's golden tresses that smelled of roses, "which is good for me. You wouldn't believe how scary you can be when you're mad. You should talk, Mr. Zap-Happy." Hera giggled, but looked up at her husband with a knowing look. "But seriously, tell me what you are concerned about." Zeus stared at his wife and conceded, "I was just checking on Thalia and Jason." "Oh," muttered the queen softly. "They're the last. You know that, right?" Zeus kissed his wife again and kissed her soft cheek as she nodded. "I know." Hera gazed down upon the human world and quickly found her husband's demigod children. "I would be lying if I said I don't mind them, but I understand that they are your children and you should be concerned for them." She knew better than anyone on Olympus that her husband greatly cared for all his children, but must be stern and strict to set an example as king, except to Athena and Artemis. He would turn into a big marshmallow whenever they ask for something. "I personally look over Jason's life. He is my champion and I do enjoy seeing him having fun. Jason is doing very well, but I'm concerned for Thalia." The king was glad to see his demigod son play around with his sister after learning how to walk, but he could tell that Thalia's relationship with her mother was quickly deteriorating. She resents her mother and I could feel some anger coming from her. "A common thing among demigods and their parents," whispered Hera. Zeus wrapped his arms around Hera, making her smile at his affection. "But I can only hope for the best. I can't interfere with the lives of demigods." He kissed his wife and led her back to their bed, smiling at the small crib next to it. "I'll focus on my true son, focus on our little boy." Zeus smiled proudly at his youngest and nodded. "I've already ordered Lupa and Dionysus to announce the birth of Naruto to both camps. A new temple will be built in Camp Jupiter so the campers could pray to him, and a nice brazier will be made at Camp Half-Blood so the campers could give their offerings." "That sounds great." Hera smiled down at Naruto, who was sleeping soundly with his arms and legs spread out on a small mattress. She couldn't help but feel incredibly warm and safe with her husband's arms around her waist and rested her head on his chest. "Finally, I have my perfect little family." The end. I hope you all liked the video. And if you all want the next part of this video, please like the video and comment 3 hearts. Please subscribe to my channel so whenever I upload a video you will notify.